All right, so this was your first time with the Book of Ruth. I'm looking at your really good comments as usual. So before I go in your comments, let me briefly go over some details of the text because some of you are not aware of the culture, so you don't know exactly. There's some places where you might not understand what's actually going on. So let me just summarize briefly, right? And then we can go to your questions. Um, so, right, this is, we know this, right? Obvious. A Hebrew family moves to Egypt. Granick mentions how this is kind of a trope. In other words, it has happened before. I'm sorry, they don't go to Egypt, they go to Moab, Moab. But Granick mentions, right, that this kind of famine scenario, right, it has already happened before with a given family having to move down to Egypt. This is Moab, though, so this is interesting. I'm curious, right? You're right, Granick. We have this happening with Abraham. We have this. Who else did you say? Jacob? What did you say? Remind me, Granick.
Yeah, I think it was Jacob and his family.
Um, Sorry, say that again. I was muting you.
Yeah, I think it was Jacob and his family. I can't remember if there were any
Of
others.
course, when they when they met Joseph, right? Obviously, right? We have same thing. Family of Jesus goes to Egypt, right? Same scenario, a famine. No, Jesus, it was a genocide, right? So here we have a famine again. They're leaving the land, and this should cast a somewhat negative light on the family. What does this tell you about this family that they leave the land when there is a famine? And this is the land, by the way. This is not like the patriarchs before inheriting the land, right? They have now already officially inherited the land. This is supposed to be the land which God has assigned them to, right? What does it mean when you're leaving the land? Anybody want to try and elaborate on this? Pierre-Antoine, go ahead.
Does it mean that they're not trusting God to provide for them, like at all? Because they're leaving to Moab, like it's Moab.
Of all places, right? This is Moab is the place where precisely they're not supposed to be welcomed in terms of nourishment, right? I think I mentioned, right, that the Moabites were the ones who, when the Hebrews arrived, they were like, we're not receiving you. You need water, you need food, we don't care, right? So they go into this, to the pariahs. They're not just going to Egypt, which is more or less on good terms in the Hebrew Bible, right? There's not this kind of animosity against Egypt, but Moab, right? They go to it's like, I don't know. Suppose you're dating someone, right? Let's do this. Suppose you're dating someone and you're mad at them and you go to your ex-boyfriend's house, right? It's like you don't do that, right? This is right. They're going to the worst place. There seems to be a kind of lack, especially the town we know means, right? Bet Lechem in Hebrew means house of bread, literally, right? So there seems to be already somewhat of a shadow cast on at least the patriarchs of the family, and indeed they all end up dying, and you can go on and on about, how they brought this on themselves or karma and so forth, right? But already, right, there's a kind of, shadow cast on this family, right? This story, so in addition to this, right, this story takes place, this is an interesting, also other comment by Granick, the story takes place at the time of the judges, right? And this is significant. In fact, Ruth, not in my Bible, I think, but in other Bibles, she's placed right after the book of Judges, right? As though they're, I think in the Christian Bible, right? Christians? Yes, okay. Pierre-Antoine, are you confirming this? She's right after Judges, right?
I'm gonna check her right now. Give me a second.
Actually, let me check. I have a Christian Bible.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
It's after Judges.
exactly. So this is also interesting, right? The placement. And if you're familiar with the book of Judges, this is the book where you meet Jephthah, Samson, Deborah, right? What kind of people are ruling the land at the time? Let's look at this a little bit. The context is interesting. I think Granick already answered the question in his paper, but I want to kind of lead you to that. Do you remember Samson, Jephthah? Deborah, I think was also a judge. Sage, tell us about these people.
Well, in particular, one that most stands out is Samson. Back then, it wasn't just like regular monarchy or whatever. It was a certain place of God placed judges to rule at a certain time in a certain place. Once the other one dies, the other one comes up. I don't know how many centuries that went on, but it was very interesting. Very interesting.
How would you say that these judges rule? Do they have amazing personalities?
That's that's very interesting because there were so many of them. Like you mentioned, Jephthah was with me the most interesting one was Samson, and I think everybody else would say the same.
Yes, so we have in general these very charismatic figures like Jephthah and Samson and Deborah, but in general, you'll notice there is a violence in the book of Judges, which is unprecedented, right, in the Hebrew Bible. There is so much, this is the place I believe in the book of Judges where they talk about the concubine that was hashed into pieces and the body parts sent into the different parts of the land to make a point, statement, right? So you have incredible violence in the book of Judges and an incredible so this is kind of that's the atmosphere, right? She arrives, this story is set in this era of violence. So tell us a little bit, Granik, how you interpreted the setting of Ruth in this against this backdrop of violence.
Yeah, so I guess I was kind of thinking that it's interesting that, like, on the one hand, it is this time of like chaos and violence, but it's also called like the time of the judges, which like kind of makes it sound like there's this focus on sort of following the law and executing the law. But it could be that the Book of Ruth is using that frame, that like time period frame, I guess, as like a way of contrasting it with this story, which it like basically pointing out the fact that it was during that time to contrast it with this story where it's really the opposite. It's a focus on, compassion and mercy, and love and chesed, like we've talked about. So I kind of thought that was interesting that like if you just are focused on judgment, and you don't have that balance, then you kind of have chaos and bloodshed.
Absolutely, right. There is a saying in Judaism that justice has to be balanced with love, right? Otherwise, you will reach the destruction of the earth, right? So if you're just in justice, it's going to be like Stajich is saying in the chat, right? Eye for eye, life for life, and we all die, from this overwhelming sense of justice. But if you just have love, likewise, right? So in the Hebrew tradition, there's this idea you have to have justice in balance with love, right? Love then becomes victim. Love allows everything. Love. So there is this tradition that the two have to be in balance. And it's as though in the book of Judges, justice is ruling by itself, right? You have someone like Jephthah who makes a vow to God that he will sacrifice whoever shows up on his path when he returns from war. And his daughter shows up and he goes through with the vow, right? I made a vow, right? There's no tenderness or love to kind of arrange things, right? Samson is just going around killing, right? We wonder when he sat down to rule, I just see him with an axe in his hand all the time, right? And of course, Deborah, right? The warrior judge, right? So absolutely, right? Maybe the sages picked Ruth to balance out and show that right justice without love leads to chaos, basically. It's a very interesting interpretation, I thought, right? Granik, you mentioned the linguistic connection in Hebrew between the word fields and the word used to describe the name of God Shaddai. I will write it in the chat in Hebrew. The fields are sedai. Sedai? How is it? I have to go back.
Yeah, it's like stay, really. It's like
Yes,
stay. Yeah.
because the fields of, right? So and then in Shaddai, most of you, right, is one of the names of God. So you're making an interesting connection. My only issue is that yes, it's the same root, but it's a shin or a sin. The pronunciation of the first letter, right, from S to sh. It does that make but I don't know. Does that make a difference in terms of making it a different root?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely not. I don't think it has the same meaning.
Like a
But
play
it's
of
just,
words, right?
yeah, I guess so. And I guess is that just a general question? Like, is that like a valid mode of interpretation in terms of like the pshat, or is that, yeah?
This is Remes. You're
Or
doing
is Remes? Okay.
this is the linguist. This is the poetic, right,
Mhm.
element. The author, perhaps, yeah. Why is the author using the word Shaddai? There's another reason I'll tell you in a bit, but certainly he could be doing a play on words between Sdei and Shaddai, kind of talking. It's a very nice midrashic interpretation what you're doing, right? More than the Remes. Remes is more grammatical, more rigorous. Remes would be like, oh, this sentence is the same as this sentence. It's more scientific. You're doing something a little more imaginative. So I would put that in the drash, right? Midrashic layer. But interesting. Shaddai, by the way, it's interesting this word is used. I'm going to elaborate on that. Shaddai from the Hebrew word shedai, which means actually breasts, right? So this is a feminine name of God, right? If you're familiar with this, Shaddai means the breasts, right? So in a way, God has also a feminine name in the Jewish tradition, which is often kind of, I haven't heard it said so often, right? I was surprised when I first heard about that. So we have this kind of divine feminine, right, in the name present already. God is already referred to as Shaddai, which is a feminine kind of name. Any questions so far on the Hebrew? Because I know we got a bit technical here, me and Granik. Any clarification you need on what we were just talking about? We're doing very deep exegesis, deeper than your pastors and your rabbis. Any questions? Okay. Great. So, okay, so you got a little bit the context, right? So then continuing, right, along the lines of what happened, we have, of course, the whole male gentry dies, and Alim is pointing out maybe they needed to die for the focus to be shifted on the women, which not bad, Alim, probably, right? If the man doesn't die, there's no no chance, right, for the woman to emerge. So that was interesting. So they die. Now, a lot of you were kind of perplexed why Ruth chose to stay with Naomi. This is what I'm going to talk about actually in detail. I will talk about this moment, this choice that Ruth makes. But on the more pragmatic, I'm going to go more into the kind of philosophical interpretation of this. But on a more pragmatic level, the elderly people depend on their children, right, to survive. And Naomi, in a way, is left with nothing when her sons died, no grandchildren. So in a way, she's left to die, right? So the decision Ruth is making, yes, there's an element of passion, and we'll talk about that, but it's also concern for the life of her mother-in-law, which is really she's doomed to wander around the streets begging, right? There is no dignity that is going to happen now because she has no family, or at least Ruth doesn't know of any family that could take care of it. Turns out she has a lot of people over there in Israel, right? Wealthy ones, right? But Ruth doesn't know this, right? So she's imagining her mother-in-law, begging in the streets, and she's like, I'm not gonna let this happen, right? Interesting idea by King, I think, this idea of a matriarchal connection, right? In other words, that was nice, King. Do you want to elaborate on that, what you said in the paper about Ruth's attachment to Naomi and what it means in terms of the shift from patriarchy to matriarchy? I like that. Want to say a few words?
So, being that Ruth is marrying into the family, she is leaving her family to go to the husband's family. So she's following the lineage of the male, and since they've passed, the only person who's left is the head of that family, which is the mother, because she gave birth to those males, and it's transitioning into a matriarch because she's following that mother wherever she goes, because she's now the head person in that position of power.
Right, very nice, right? And in fact, the word that is used for her, which is translated, I think, cleaved, is actually a very powerful word, which is used to describe Adam's attachment to Eve, right? So this is a powerful emotional. Some people, I mean, you might, usually it's used in a sexual connotation, right? Here, obviously, it's just simply to show the strength of the passion, the attachment that is almost like that of a husband and wife, right? There's something very powerful in her attachment to Naomi, in a way showing perhaps that her allegiance was perhaps always to the mother-in-law rather than to the son. We don't know, right? The sons don't look like great characters. I have to say, the names that they have, which means both sickly and what's the other meaning? Somebody Hebrew speaking.
Destruction, maybe.
Yeah, destruction. So the names of the sons are not great, right? One of them, Mahlon, means is from the root to be sick, and the other one, hold on, Chilion, right, is from the root meaning to destroy. So the sons don't seem like great characters. So it might be natural, right, that the women, in a way, became deeply attached to their mother-in-law because perhaps it was the only person in the household that they could really connect to, perhaps, right? I mean, the men in the story don't look great, right? Elimelech going off leaving the land, the sons having kind of sickly names, right? King, you have a quick question. Go ahead. Or are you still?
Yeah, is there something in the language that might suggest something romantic between Ruth and Naomi? This was something that we talked about in our group. Granny brought to talk. That it
Yeah.
was a really good point because I think it was line 9 that she was really getting into wherever you go, I'm gonna go. Where you die,
Yes.
I'm gonna die.
Yeah, I mean, you have the word to cleave. This is, where is that? Shit. Somebody help me. It's written so small, I'm gonna die. Uh, when does it say that she cleaves to her mother-in-law? But Ruth clung to her, verse 14, right? This word cling, I believe, is the same word used for Adam to cling to his wife, right? And the man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. This is the same word. Correct me, Hebraics. Is this the same word? I haven't checked, but I was thought it was the same word. So are we gonna check? Is that somebody check for me while I continue, okay? Kestenbaum, Goldberg, and Brannick, please check for me if it's the same word that's used. I believe it is. So this is, yes, King, there's even something definitely passionate beyond just agape love, right? Beyond just the normal. There's something much more powerful at play. And you can say, I mean, you could argue that their attachment to their mother-in-law, perhaps if she was the only person who was, a decent human being in the household, there might have been a transfer, right? Of course, the Bible is not going to go into the details, right? And in general, right, we know the heteronormativity of the Bible, but some people have commented on this. You're right, King. Some people have noticed this and made a comment that maybe their love was a little deeper than just a mother-in-law and a daughter, although it was very, very much prohibited, right? Any type of sexual connection between family members is, taboo, right? So I would venture to argue that it's more talking about a very passionate attachment, which is beyond, which is not normal, right? It's not normal. Thank you, Goldstein. Same word, very good, right? So this is definitely, there is something going on which is unusual, King, and you notice it very, very well. So then, right, continuing with the story and on with your questions too. I see I'm able to do both. That's nice. So they arrive in the land. She switches her name to Mara. Mara does mean bitter. Alim, I don't know, maybe you're thinking of Arabic, because a lot of women, right, are called Mara, perhaps in the Arabic context means different, but in the Hebrew, Mara simply means bitter. Makes sense, Alim? Yeah. So maybe, of course, people give Bible names to their children all the time without checking the meaning, right? So maybe, right, a lot of people call their babies Mara because they like the sound of it, not knowing that it actually means bitter, right? Literally. Um, Interesting point by Delmas, which I'll make in general. Right, we're going to talk today about Ruth's love, which I hope I have time for. I should start soon, right? Um, there's a connection, of course, and also a contrast between these texts and the texts of the goddess Inanna, right? In these Sumerian texts, you have an emphasis on sex, whereas in these biblical texts, you have an emphasis on love, right? So you still have sex, right? But the emphasis is placed, and this is interesting, on love, and we're going to talk about that, right? Very nicely observed, Delmas. So quickly, continuing to summarize briefly, and then I have to get into today. So she arrives, right? And Ruth goes to work immediately in the fields. Now, what she's actually doing, some people are wondering, what is she doing? There was a law in ancient Israel where if you were a foreigner, if you were an orphan, if you were a widow, when there was a harvest, you could go behind the reapers, and whatever they left behind, it was yours, right? So so they're reaping, right? They're collecting the sheaves, and if a few sheaves drop, it's yours, right? Or if they skip over, that's yours too, right? So that was a law for the poor, right, of the land. So what she's doing is simply going behind the reapers as they're reaping. She's picking up what they're leaving behind. It's interesting that Boaz actually kind of cheats a little bit. We'll see how Boaz is constantly cheating with the law, right? He's constantly kind of stretching the law. And he's telling his servants, leave some, let some drop, right? So she can have even more, right? So this is an interesting detail. So she's working all day. She's noticed, not because of her beauty, that is not mentioned, the beauty which is usually mentioned, right? When a woman is beautiful, the narrator immediately says so, right? This is always noticed by the biblical narrator. If he doesn't mention it, she's not beautiful, right? But she's noticed, right? There's something about her. And remember, she's described as the word is terrible. It's virtuous woman. Oh my God. It's not that at all. It's actually the word here. Same word, by the way, for used for Boaz. We'll talk about that. Virtuous man. The word for virtuous in the Hebrew, of course, has some connection to virtue, but it's chayil, which means actually simply valiant, strong. In the modern Hebrew, it means soldier, right? So we are talking here about a very strong woman who is charismatic through her strength, right? Whether it's physical or certainly physical strength, right? Ruth doesn't seem to be, right, one of those dainty, right? She seems to be very well built, right, for what she's doing. She's certainly physically strong, but there is also kind of an inner strength, and this is what is noticed, right? So this is one of the rare times in the Bible that a woman is noticed not because of her beauty, right? Great. So it's a little interesting detail that I noticed, or that I didn't notice. I saw somebody mention. So Boaz, of course, is all nice to her, right? Calling her my daughter, meaning huge age gap, right? The Jewish tradition makes him 80 and she is 40, right? We don't know, but that's how they interpret, right? So he's kind to her, right? He notices her. She stands out clearly. And it's interesting because he says, make sure you stay with the women, right? She goes home and she says, yeah, I gleaned among the workers, like, and it was a detail, but Ruth doesn't seem to know her place, right? She seems a bit clueless about the law of the land. She's gleaning with the guys. She's not supposed to be doing that, right? Women are supposed to be with women, men with men, and Ruth is kind of all over the place. She's very naive, right? Okay, so, and then of course, that's the end of the story. She brings the food back. Naomi is like, oh, this guy is a relative. Ah, we didn't know, right? All of a sudden, we all discovered together she has this wealthy relative. And that's the end so far. Okay, now, I want to get into a particular part of the story, and I'm going to be dealing with it. Most of this, what I've prepared with the book of Ruth, my obsession, right, with these texts is really what can we learn when it comes to, you remember there are the two paths, right, the father's house, the mother's house. Father's house teaches a number of commandments, which are very useful, right, to live a good life. Mother's house simply teaches to love, right? So I'm intrigued, right, throughout the text. What does it mean to love, right? And what can we learn, especially as women, but in general, right, when it comes to gender relations, what are some of the lessons we can get in this text as to how to love each other, right? This is my goal. So throughout what we'll be doing, we'll really be going into how we're going to be following the footsteps of Ruth. How does she love, right? What is the quality of her love? What can we learn from her in terms of gender relations, right? I'm just looking, there were a few more comments I didn't want to skip. There's never enough time. Okay, quickly, just a couple comments. Yes, Wagler mentions, very interesting point, where is God in the story? We're going to talk about that, right? God is behind the scenes. We're going to show how that is to be the case. Alim thinks that Ruth is pretty submissive. Alim, this is all she's tricking us, right? Ruth is really all her spiel with Boaz. Oh, your servant, your servant. You don't buy any of it when you see how powerful this woman already is, right? Ruth is an extremely powerful character, and she is humble, right? She's polite, but you can sense in everything that she does this kind of iron will, right? So she's deferring, right, to Boaz, but at the same time you can sense a kind of very strong dignity, right, in her. So, and we'll see that she gets more and more, that her strength grows, right, with the story. Okay, I think I'll stop there with you guys' comments. Yes, last point. Kestenbaum and Delmas. Yes, this is all forbidden. All this relationship, right, with Boaz. I talked about this, right? This goes against Hebrew law. And we mentioned this in the introduction, right? And I want to add, at no point does Ruth convert. She's called throughout. The text makes this clear, right? The text calls her throughout the story Ruth the Moabite, right? Till the end. She's carrying the baby, she's still Ruth the Moabite, right? After the wedding, she's still Ruth the Moabite, right? So the text seems to want to make the point that she never integrates. She's never assimilated. She maintains her otherness, her background, right? So there's no assimilation here, which in the Hebrew context is perfectly okay, except for Moabites. Great. Okay, let's get into today's, what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to just comment this very short sentence I think we just talked about it, 2:14, chapter 1, verse 14, but Ruth clung to her. This is the verse I want to comment. But Ruth clung to her, which we already talked about, right? With king. To cling or to cleave is a very, very strong, passionate, usually reserved between man and wife, right? This is happening now between Ruth and Naomi, right? So I want to talk a little bit about this because it is a surprising thing she does here, right? This is not normal. At least it's not to her benefit, right? If she loses her husband, she has every right to go back home and find a new one, right? This is in fact what she should do. And this is what Orpah does, right? Her friend, right? The other woman there. This is the normal thing to do. Here's Ruth continuing in the trajectory that she started, right? She married the man. She's with the mother-in-law. She's just going to stay the course, right? I want to talk a little bit about this notion of staying the course when it comes to love. This is the topic for today. Staying the course. If I were to preach a sermon, I would call the sermon Staying the Course, right? Because I find this is intriguing to me, and it should be intriguing. It is intriguing to a lot of what I've read from. A lot of you were intrigued by this because it makes no sense. What she is choosing by staying the course is death, right? She's with an old woman. What's going to happen now? No man. Going back to a foreign land where she can't marry, right? We know this, right? She cannot marry these people. First of all, she's too old, right? She's too old. She's a Moabite. She doesn't stand a chance, right? So in a way, she's choosing the worst possible thing, right? But she's staying the course, right? And in doing so, and this is what's powerful, this is what ultimately distinguishes her from ordinary, right? Staying the course in the text leads to this amazing destiny, right? So the text seems to be saying there is something to staying the course when it comes to life in general, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Kestenbaum, do you want to add?
Yeah, I have a quick question that I know we touched upon earlier, but it seems that Ruth and also Naomi, sort of by staying the course and just continuing to travel on, what gets overlooked is the fact that Naomi was not so, I don't know the right word here, but she kind of complained, and there was clearly a lot of friction with her relationship with God. So whereas Ruth showed devotion, and no matter what happens, I'm there for you, Naomi does not show that devotion to God. She constantly says, my life is bitter, and, look at all these misfortunes that have befallen me. So whereas Ruth, I totally agree, is this model devotion and of, seeing through adversity. But Naomi is very much the foil to that. She just constantly reminds Ruth, like, okay, if you're staying, just know everything is terrible because God punished me. So I just don't, it seems like she's being let off so easily. And I don't know, it just really bothered me when I was reading these two chapters.
You're right. None of these characters are great, including Boaz, by the way. He's not that great. He's nice, but he's not really like, he's kind of sluggish, right? So none of these characters, I mean, Ruth really stands out, right? But even Naomi, you're right. I mean, the whole family seems really messed up. Naomi is, soon something, well, actually, to be honest, she did kind of, she took two very heavy blows, one after the other, right? Goldstein mentions that there's a same verb used when she loses her husband and when she loses her sons, she remained. She was just remained, like kind of, like a little piece of garbage remaining, right? So she's gone through a lot, but you're right. She's oscillate. She's not that great with God. She's not that great with Ruth, by the way. When Ruth makes this big declaration, Naomi just stays silent. She's like, whatever. You want to screw your life up, go ahead. Basically that's what I'm hearing. She gets home, everyone's welcoming her. Don't talk to me, And then she doesn't even connect with her family, right? This is a very dysfunctional family. So you're right, Kestenbaum. But in this context, right, everybody's dysfunctional. Even the best one, right? You have this woman, right, who stays the course. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, and then I'll come back to some questions. What's interesting is that she stays the course. Why? Is it self-interest? No, right? What is the only reason she would stay the course? Love, right? Love for her mother-in-law. It's not love for, particular man, but we see here very clearly that she's staying the course in the name of love, right? In other words, love has prescribed to her to stay the course. She knows that if she leaves Naomi, Naomi will die, at least in her mind, right? She doesn't know how it is in Israel, right? That there's laws to protect the widow. She doesn't know this, right? For her, if she leaves Naomi, Naomi will die. And so the decision she makes is completely made in the name of love. In the name of love, I will stay with you, even if it means my own death, right? This is the reasoning, right? She is making a decision, not from some kind of societal law, right? She's making a decision based on the law of her heart, right? You see the shift, right? We're in the mother's house. The law is different. The law is written on the heart now, right? It's not written on tablets of stone. And the law of her heart is prescribing to her at that moment, you will stay with this woman, right? Now, what's interesting is that, kind of like a Cinderella story, right? This decision, which seemed to lead to death, leads to powerful new life, rejuvenation, and so forth. And so I want to talk about this a little bit because this is interesting to me, that really what we're learning here, and make sure you write this down because this is very, very counter-cultural for us, right? But what we're seeing here is a woman so deeply attuned to love in general that she ends up finding love, right? When we are deeply attuned to love in general, this is how we find love, right? There's a connection, right, between being loving and finding love, right? A lot of us are single, right? And we're thinking, how can I attract love, right? How can I attract the one, right? A lot of us are thinking along those lines. What we're learning from Ruth is that it's simple. Attune yourself to love and love will come running to you, right? In other words, enter the trajectory of love or enter the frequency of love, to use kind of physical, right, terms from the realm of physics. Enter that frequency. Just be on that level, right? Where if I were to look at the metaphysical laws of the universe, right? There's physical laws of the universe and there are metaphysical laws of the universe. In the metaphysical laws of the universe, if you want to find love, you need to be love, right? And so one of the things we're learning here is that if you are still single and you want to attract love, the best thing to do, you don't need to go to clubs, you don't need to go over here, do this, parties and so forth. You don't even need to start dating officially, nothing. Cultivate love within yourself and stay the course. No matter what love prescribes, you do, right? No matter if it feels like it's gonna be the end of you, right? You do that, right? So that's the first thing I'm learning, right? And it's interesting because the word that is used to mention her entering the field of Boaz, right? Let's look at that really quick. It says by chance, right? She entered the field of Boaz by chance. I'm trying to see where this is. Help me out if you know where this is. The moment she entered the field. As luck would have it, verse 2. Chapter 2, verse 2, right? As luck would have it, it says, right? As luck would have it. Now it's interesting. So, of course, if you read the pshat on the superficial level, you're like, oh, by chance, right? But you have the same expression used, and we can turn there, in Genesis 24. So let's go there right now. 24, verse 12. So let's turn there right now. So I'm going there myself. Genesis 24, 12. You have here Eliezer, right? Looking for a wife for Isaac. This is Abraham's servant, right? Looking for a woman for his master. Okay, 24, 12. Can't read these numbers. Okay, he said blah, blah, blah. Okay, now he's praying before he arrives on the spot, right, where there are potential women. He's at the well, right, where there are many women. And he prays and he says, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, grant me good fortune. Same word. This time to talk about God, kind of behind the scenes, what do you call it? Orchestration, right? So it's the same Hebrew word, right? So it's interesting that perhaps we are what we see, kind of in a secular vision, we see by chance. What this kind of connection with Genesis 24 is teaching us is that God perhaps is already orchestrating this behind the scenes, right? Or you can just see it in terms of the laws of the universe, right? If you're aligned with love, you'll find love, right? That's another kind of new agey, right? If you're on the love frequency, love will come to you, right? In any case, there is something working in her favor. It seems, in the text, right? If you look at the parallel text. Are you following what I just did with Genesis 24? Put your hand in the screen if you're following, right? This is a common way to do it. You take a word, a sentence, and you see if there's a similar sentence, and you know they're connected, right? So here we know that perhaps, right, because we know how this word was used in Genesis 24, we are imagining that perhaps God may be also orchestrating this, right? Yes. Very good. Thank you, Stage. Quantum entanglements. Yes, you can talk about it like that, right? So, she, and by the way, there's another way to see this. Notice that in the text, there are both Ruth and Boaz are described in the same way. This is another metaphysical law of the universe, right? She is called an Eshet Chayil, which is a strong woman, right? And he is called an Eshet. He's called a Gibor Chayil. I can't write on this Chayil, which is a strong man. There is a clear, if you want to know the reference, Eshet Chayil is 312, right? If you go to 312, we can go there right now, which we didn't read, but that's okay. If you go to 312, you're here. No. This is the wrong verse. It's not the right verse. Okay, I'll have to look at where hers is mentioned. If someone can find it, that would be great. 2:1 is where, yes, we have here Gibor Chayil, man of substance. So that's for Boaz, right? 2:1 describes Boaz, and for the woman, he calls her this, right? He calls her, you are a worthy woman, blah, blah, blah. Help me, guys. Help me find this text. Okay, I have to look maybe later. But if someone finds it, let me know, right? The same expression used to describe her, right? Eshet, by the way, simply means a woman, right? And Gibor means man. But they both are giving the same adjective in the text, Chayil, which means strong, or virtuous, right? And this is interesting, right? The narrator is saying these two people share something very deep. They share on the level of their inner essence, right? Kind of like, I don't know if you studied Aristotle's definition of friendship, right? But Aristotle says you can only be a friend with someone with whom you share on a deep soul level, on the level of virtue. You have the same values, right? You are equal in terms of your values, in terms of what is important to you. And here we see this very deep soul connection, this very deep connection on the level of character, right? Which unites them. So, which brings me to another metaphysical law of the universe: like attracts like. So we've learned two laws. Number one, attune yourself to love and you will find love, right? And number two, like attracts like. If you want to attract a great love, become a great lover, right? If you want to attract an amazing person, become amazing, right? This is the best thing you can do. If you're with someone who's horrible, that's because you're horrible. There, I'm telling it like it is. Right? If your boyfriend or girlfriend is just a mess, you're a mess. This is what this is saying, right? If you're with someone amazing, guess what? You're amazing, right? So this is the idea here that we're learning also. These are some little clues in the text, right, that are giving me some deep insight into the nature of relationships, romantic relationships, right? Which I find really interesting. So I think I covered some of the details in the text, right? Did anyone find the Eshet Chayil? I really want to find that one so you can see very clearly that they're named the same. Can I put someone on this? Who wants to do this and look it up? Hebrew person. I have just the three of you, Kestenbaum, Granik, and Goldstein. You are asked to look this up for me while I summarize a little bit. Okay, let me take a few questions on what I said, and then I just want to kind of wrap it up a little. I'll stay maybe 5 minutes later just to wrap up everything. Any questions? I know some of you are boiling. I think Delmas had a question at one point. Who wants to clarify anything I said so far? Okay, Stage, go ahead.
Well, I actually have a comment on something you're talking about when it comes to male and female attributes. I don't know if you want to say it right now or afterwards, but we're talking about male and female right now. What I believe is all these things. Actually, I wrote it down because I went through it. For example, you're talking about female attributes as being God as being female, and we see these attributes as sensitivity, gentleness, sympathy, empathy, and stuff like that. And when we're talking about masculinity, we see it, and this is all back in biblical times, looked at character strength, charge, leadership, assertiveness, and all that stuff. I don't think that in any of that God is neither or. It just shows the qualities that God has. No matter what it is, God isn't pushing for male or female. It's just all these are qualities of God. It doesn't. The God in any particular time is neither of these genders. Rather, just shows qualities that God has in general. It's been going through my mind the whole time we're talking about all this, because it kind of it makes, honestly, it makes no sense to me to push God in one direction than the other, because like I said, God is neither genders, and
Yeah.
we know when his son the Christ came, even the Christ cried, and Christ showed sympathy, and Christ, however, on rare occasion, very rare occasions, Jesus showed anger and assertiveness and stuff like that, and courage. So the female attributes versus masculine, feminine versus masculine is not what's going on here. It's not God one, God female, or God male. Rather, these are just attributes that people have in themselves.
Right. So obviously, right, God is neither male or female, right? But he has feminine attributes and masculine
Yeah,
attributes.
but
Right? In the
that's
Hebrew.
not what I'm saying, though.
Let me finish, please. Let me finish. Thank you.
Okay.
Right. So, what we're learning here, right, is that in most of the Bible, God is described with predominantly male attributes, right? And what we're seeing in these texts is a different vision, right? It's different. We are emphasizing other attributes, right? Which are giving us a deeper insight, right, into who God might be, which is the goal, right, of studying these texts. So, yeah, thank you. Because yes, you're right. God is neither male nor female. But right, we have had a kind of one-sided view of him. He has been described mostly with male metaphors, right? And what we're seeing here is him being embodied, right, by women, and actually being his attributes being kind of expressed, right, in a feminine way. Granik, do you want to add?
Yeah, I found the verse.
Yes, Lyson
Um,
also. 1:11? No, 3:11.
3:11. Oh, I
3:11.
didn't see. Sorry.
Yes,
Yeah,
3:11.
yeah, sorry. I didn't see in the chat. My bad.
A fine woman, it says. Fine, of course, fine. They would never say. Uh, so the man is seen as how did they say the man? Hold on, when it says him, 1:1, right? So the man is translated a man of substance, right? But she's translated a fine woman. Right? Actually, should be a woman of substance, right? That is the same word. So if you translate a man of substance, then also I think Goldberg would be the one to make this kind of connection, right? The woman also here is seen as a woman of substance. So Boaz, it's interesting. Boaz is a man of substance clearly because of his wealth. She has nothing. She has substance within, right? She's extremely, there's a presence in her that we're discerning here, right? Okay, so let's see if there's any other question before I just summarize everything. Pierre-Antoine, do you want to add?
Yeah, I kind of just thought of like the redemptive curse or whatever, like back from Genesis 3:16, thinking about like Eve in a sense, like kind of like how she had like that inner richness. Like I think that's what's being implemented and shown again through Ruth. Like she had, like clearly you said she has nothing, like she has no husband, no anything besides her mother-in-law, but like Boaz was the one to see like she had something like more to her.
Right.
It's not just her beauty.
Yes, this is great news, right? For all of us, that you don't necessarily have to be, you know, a supermodel to attract attention, right? I mean, if you are a woman of substance, if you have a presence, right, like Ruth had, you can certainly catch someone's eye, right? So let me go over some lessons, right, that we can learn, just to summarize everything, and you can jot this down, right? First thing I learned from this text is to choose love, no matter how crazy and risky it seems, right? And I'm saying this because very often, right, we begin a relationship, right? This is very often the case. You start a relationship, things start to become complicated, right? And now you're thinking self-preservation. Yo, I don't need this, you know, we need to separate. Let's not continue, right? This is hurting me. I can't wait for you forever, right? I need to move on with my life. These are some of the things we tell ourselves, right? I'm not being served by this relationship. This is your therapist. Is this relationship serving you? Right? As though that was the purpose of a relationship, right? So we have this refrain that a relationship is supposed to serve us and we're supposed to be, you know, happy and so forth. Obviously, happiness is a big part of it, but not the only one. And very often we choose from a place of fear instead of from a place of love when we are caught in a complicated relationship. We choose from a place of fear. Let me protect myself and get the hell out, right? Instead of choosing from a place of love. Now, the love might prescribe a separation. I'm not saying love might not tell you maybe you need to go. But love sometimes will prescribe continuing. Like Ruth, staying the course. It looks like death. It looks like I'm going to end and lose everything. But the idea here is whatever you choose to do when you are in a complicated relationship, to choose from a place of love and not fear. Orpah, the other woman in the story, chooses from a place of fear. She's like, yo, if I stay with this woman, I'm done. Like, no husband, no children, nothing. I'm out. right? And Ruth, on the contrary, is choosing from a place of love. If I leave this woman, she will die, right? So this is what we're learning, to choose love no matter how crazy and risky it is, because in the end, this is the decision that will bring us to a higher destiny, right? Orpah goes back, leads an ordinary life. We never hear of her again, right? Ruth stays the course, becomes the matriarch of a king, right? So what we're learning here is, even if it seems crazy, to always make your decisions from a place of love, even if it seems you're going to get destroyed in the process, will always lead you to your higher version of yourself, to the higher destiny you were meant to have. Guess what? There are several destinies we could have: mediocre destinies, ordinary destinies, or outrageous, extravagant, extraordinary destinies. It depends on us. On what frequency are you? Are you on the frequency of fear? Because then you'll have an ordinary life. It'll be fine, you'll be happy, don't worry. You'll be happy, comfortable, like Nietzsche says. You'll be comfortable, right? But if you want to reach your highest destiny, right, the amazing destiny, extraordinary destiny, goddess destiny, right, choosing from a place of love is the risk you have to take, making all your decisions from that place with no fear of missing your destiny because you chose love. Ruth finds her destiny by choosing love, right? So that's the first thing that I'm learning from this text, right? Always make a decision from a place of love and not fear, because this is what will bring me to my highest destiny rather than just comfortable, ordinary, right, life. Second thing I'm learning, you can write this down, is what we talked about earlier, right? Like attracts like. If you want an amazing, right, Prince Charming, become a princess, right? Become amazing yourself, work on yourself, right? There's, in fact, when you're in a crisis in a relationship, right, you can already, even if you're in a relationship, you can think about like attracts like, because when you change in the relationship, your partner will change. You see what I mean? We have that power to influence. So as you're shifting within the relationship, right? This doesn't even have to be about being single. You're in a crazy relationship. It's going wrong. It's going to die. You shift, they will shift. As you become this, they will become this, right? So not only it attracts, but like you can actually, you can influence. As you shift, your partner will also begin to shift, right? And you can change the whole course of your relationship just by shifting, because like attracts like. As you become loving, they become loving. You become fearful, they become fearful. You become a bitch, they become the male equivalent, right? I don't know what it is. Right? Whatever you are becoming, you are attracting, right? You are drawing from the other person. So this is very, very interesting insights, I think, that we can gather from this text. Just to close, there's a beautiful story. I don't know if you saw the movie, The Theory of Everything. How many of you saw this movie, The Theory of Everything? Let me check. Put your hand in the screen if you know. Okay, it's a great movie. You need to watch it. It's a movie about, what's his name? This guy, the scientist. Hawking, is that him? Or Dawkins?
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking.
Okay, I always mix him up with Dawkins. Okay, Hawking. Remember, he's in a wheelchair. He's an amazing scientist, right? Physicist. Story of his life. I'm going to ruin it. Should I ruin it? Are you going to let me ruin it and tell you what happens? Or should I?
I mean,
not?
he died 2 years ago, so you could ruin it.
Oh, wait, it's okay, but I'm ruining the movie. I'm ruining the movie. How many don't want me to ruin the movie? Just close your ears. You can listen to the recording later. Just close your ears. In the story, he marries, his first wife is a very devout Catholic or Christian, I don't know anymore which type. And she kind of, stays with him through thick and thin. And at one point, she falls in love with someone else, right? Choir director. And they have this amazing soul connection. Her and this choir director, they share the same faith, right? They're really, you can sense they're soulmates. And because of her faith, she's like, no, right? She makes the decision from a place of love. I married this man. I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to, go with my soulmate. This is her soulmate, right? That she's saying no to, right? And she's like, I'm going to choose from a place of love and not from a place of fear. She stays with Hawkins. Right? Few years later, he divorces her. Goes with this nurse from the depths of hell who destroys his life, right? I don't know her. Maybe she was nice, right? And she ends up 10 years, right, later, I mean, 10 years after having first met this soulmate of hers, she ends up with him, right? So she ends up with him differently than she would have ended up if she had destroyed Hawkins, dumped him, and so forth, right? So what I'm learning from this beautiful story is that when you choose love, no matter how far away it seems to bring you from your true destiny, you'll bounce back, right? To make decisions in your life based on love and not fear seems very risky to your own happiness and survival. But what we're learning from the book of Ruth is to choose love will always bring you to the most amazing destiny you were meant to have, to your soulmate, right? As we found in the story. I found the story really fascinating for that reason. I checked actually to see if it was actually true, because the movie says that, but did they embroider or embellish? Actually, it's true. It's actually what happened, right? Okay, guys, let you go. If you still have questions, you can stay. If you need some clarification, brief clarification, you can stay. Otherwise, you can go. Next time, please, sorry, stay. You need to read Ruth chapter 3. Just chapter 3, and you do a reading assignment on chapter 3. All right, guys, bye. Stop the recording.